Hi, this is Anthony. Welcome back to my show. It's been a while since I've done anything on D.B. Cooper, though these have been my most popular videos, so let's jump right in. I've mentioned in the past that I started reading Max Gunther's book called D.B. Cooper, What Really Happened, and I've had some people ask me to make a video once I finish, letting them know what I thought about the book. But before I talk about the book, let me just go over a bit of my thoughts of the D.B. Cooper case, which I'm assuming most viewers are going to be somewhat knowledgeable about. I personally don't have any strongly held opinions on who Cooper's identity really was. It's easy to read an article or see a documentary and get convinced because, of course, evidence that would tend to exclude that person is usually not presented. And I haven't come across anything that currently has me convinced that it's one particular person, although I have to admit that a recently revealed potential suspect named Milton B. Vordahl is an intriguing candidate. I did a short video about him a few weeks ago, and that is episode 278 of my show. So maybe check that one out after you watch this. I think that trace evidence on the tie that was left behind may help narrow down suspects, but we should be cautious in jumping to conclusions too quickly. Certainly, one theory is that Cooper died in the jump, possibly ending up in the Columbia River, which would account for some of the money being found in 1980 in the sand on the North Shore downstream from Vancouver. Obviously, if that was the case, that Cooper perished, then none of these suspects put forward could have been him, since they all survived past that time. But I don't rule out that he could have survived. Now, let's turn to the book. As I was starting to write this script, I was thinking about what in the book caused me some concern, and what are other concerns that I either didn't notice or which have come to light since it was published, that are available in particular online. Obviously, if you have a crime that is linked to a suspect by a chain of evidence, but one link is missing or exonerates the suspect, then that person is probably not the culprit. So I was looking for things in the book that did the same thing, that was a broken link in the chain. So I recently got access to Google's AI software called Bard, and it on occasion can do a pretty good job of creating things or answering questions, although a lot of times it seems to be just copied from Wikipedia or sound like it is. Here is what Bard AI created for my question, and that question is, what are some problems with Max Gunther's book, D.B. Cooper, What Really Happened? And it does seem that it's not lifted from Wikipedia, the answer that it gives. So here's what Bard created, and I'll talk about it afterwards with some of my own thoughts. Max Gunther's book, D.B. Cooper, What Really Happened, was published in 1985 and is one of the most popular books about the unsolved hijacking of Northwest Orient Airlines Flight 305 in 1971. The book presents a theory about who D.B. Cooper was and how he escaped, but it's been criticized for its lack of evidence and its reliance on speculation. One of the main problems with Gunther's book is that it relies on a single source for much of its information, a man named Robert Rackley, who claimed to have been Cooper's accomplice. Rackley's story is full of inconsistencies and has been discredited by many experts. Gunther also makes a number of other claims that are not supported by evidence, such as his assertion that Cooper was a former military officer. Another problem with Gunther's book is that it's written in a very sensationalized style. Gunther frequently uses hyperbole and exaggeration, and he often makes unsupported claims about Cooper's motives and actions. This makes it difficult to take the book seriously as a work of nonfiction. Despite its flaws, D.B. Cooper, What Really Happened remains a popular book about one of the most famous unsolved mysteries in American history. The book's flaws should be kept in mind when reading it, but it can still be an enjoyable and informative read for those who are interested in the D.B. Cooper case. So that's what it said. Let's look at what Bard came up with. It states that the book is based primarily on information from Robert Rackley. Here's a name that I've not come across, although it sounds suspiciously like Robert Rackstraw, who of course has been identified as a potential Cooper suspect, although the FBI cleared him, and one of the stewardesses said that his picture did not match what she remembered of Cooper. And just Googling the name Robert Rackley, I didn't come across anybody with that name associated with the Cooper case. In the book, there is no mention of any accomplice in the hijacking, so that part is not accurate. And of course, if you read the book, Gunther clearly states that the information came from a woman whose name or pseudonym was Clara, and was a woman who found Cooper hiding in a shed on the property that she was occupying at the time of the hijacking, and then continued to help him, and they eventually got married. So, not quite sure how Bard came up with that information or missed anything about Clara. Now, in the book, there's a number of pieces of supposed information that are given. It's stated that the skyjacker really had the first name of Dan originally, that he was born in Canada, I think in London, Ontario, and that his mother and he moved to the United States subsequently. Some general dates and locations of educational institutions are mentioned, as well as little bits of work history. If that information was true, then one might be able to comb databases, which might lead to the true identification of the suspect. However, in my opinion, this may well have been a completely fictionalized book written by Gunther to foist onto the public as nonfiction. A book with no actual informants, no Clara, no Robert Raxey, purely the invention of the author based on research and interviews with law enforcement. As you read through the book, there's a lot of things that make sense, but a lot of things that are a little questionable. As far as the money, there's a convoluted story about him burying it when he lands, and then they have to go back and recover it later on, and raccoons have found it and spread it around, but they're able to get most of it back. The book doesn't explain how any of it got onto Tina Barr, but at the end it does mention that approximately 3 bundles of $20 bills were found in 1980. But a lot of detail goes into the struggle of the skyjacker and his wife trying to launder $20 bills into the economy, and the psychological difficulty of that process for fear of being caught. And I can understand that. $20 was a fair amount of money in the 1970s. But then he gets an idea to commit another hijacking where instead of money, which has serial numbers that can be traced, he is thinking about asking for gold. Now, this is problematic for 2 reasons. One, anachronistically, gold cannot be legally owned by American citizens, other than in small quantities or in jewelry like wedding rings, at the time that he was thinking about the gold heist. It was not until December 31st, 1974, that President Ford signed legislation into effect allowing American residents to resume possessing gold in significant quantities. For this reason, I don't think that Cooper's character would be planning such a heist. In the book, it's mentioned that they could melt the gold bars down into smaller amounts. This seems far more problematic, getting gold bars and melting them down and trying to find people who will buy the suspect gold from you, than simply finding things to buy with $20 bills from the original ransom, or laundering them in casinos in Nevada, which is what they eventually did according to the book. And I double-checked, and it seemed to be clear that he was thinking of these ideas supposedly prior to the end of 1974. I don't think in real life he would have been planning to receive a ransom in gold, which he could not legally and easily dispose of, but somebody coming up with that story in the mid-1980s, when the book was written, may have forgotten that gold ownership was controlled prior to 1975. Overall, it's a fairly fast read. If you want to read it as fiction, it's fairly enjoyable. If you're reading it as nonfiction in connection with researching the case and you don't know much about the D.B. Cooper case, be very cautious about believing everything you read. For instance, I think it mentions that Cooper did not drink anything on the plane during the skyjacking, when of course it's reported that he had 2 bourbons. Anyway, has anyone else read the book? If so, what do you think about it? By the way, if you look for it online, it can be very expensive. I happen to get my copy through interlibrary loan from a library in my county. You might look to that way of getting a copy rather than spending $150 for a copy on the internet. Let's respond to a few comments, and I'll try to keep this video short. This is a kind comment from Dustin. Thank you very much. What I've tried to communicate in all my videos is let's look at the case objectively. Make sure that we really know what the facts are. And the more you study, the more you realize it is very, very difficult to agree on what exactly the facts are. when we don't have evidence to look at, when we just have to accept what the FBI has said or what has been reported someplace. And even when we can look at a particular piece of evidence, sometimes the analysis or interpretation of it, whether it's the tie or the money found at Tina Bar, it still leads to disputes amongst researchers. Ultimately, the goal is to identify who the perpetrator was to everyone's agreement, not to find a potential suspect and do whatever is necessary to convince people that that candidate is Cooper, even if you have to lie or leave out exculpatory evidence. That really doesn't solve the mystery, it just creates factions within the Cooper sphere. But again, thank you for your comment. Here's another comment from Jennifer Garcia, which is making reference to an episode of Loki, which is a series for Marvel about the mischievous brother of Thor. In one episode from the series, Loki is D.B. Cooper and jumps out of the plane, although he does so during daylight rather than at night, which is actually when it took place. I've not actually seen any episodes, but I've seen a lot of analysis of the program on YouTube, and while you shouldn't watch it to gain a greater understanding of the D.B. Cooper case, the whole series looks very interesting, well thought out, and well put together. Any comments from my viewers on that? Or any of you watching Loki or any of the other Marvel series streaming on Disney+. Okay, King British says the sketch looks absolutely identical to William J. Smith. The eyes alone are bang on exact. If you look at Smith, all you see is the D.B. Cooper sketch. I agree that Smith and some of the sketches of Cooper look extremely similar, but the problem is so many pictures of the candidates look similar to the Cooper sketches. And even some of the ones I think look extremely close have been excluded by the actual witnesses. However, we all know that eyewitnesses are fallible. But at this point, the composite sketches are the best that researchers can use, but hopefully DNA may provide a breakthrough. DNA in particular, that which may be on the clip-on tie left behind on the plane. And as an aside, when looking at sketches next to pictures of suspects, be very cautious. I've seen some researchers or proponents who have altered the sketches to look more like their candidate, so be cautious there. Although I'm not saying that this is the case of anybody that's pushing for Smith. And here Ryan Burns is referring to the Clara, who supposedly is the widow of Cooper, giving information to Max Gunther. There's a picture of the letter that's being referenced here in the book, I believe. Certainly, if the envelopes were saved and there were postage stamps attached, there could be DNA that helps in this case. I think, in this particular case, rather than deathbed confessions, of which there are many, it's going to be cracked, either through DNA or just someone who's mushroom hunting out in the woods of southwestern Washington, coming across a skeleton, a parachute, and other identifiable artifacts that tie it to the skyjacking. Couple last comments before I close. I've stated many times that while I disagree with Eric Ulis' identification of Vince Peterson as potentially being Cooper, I nevertheless have a lot of respect for Eric, and I encourage people to check out his channel. He posts every once in a while about the Cooper case, along with other cases such as the Gardner Museum heist, which is an interesting case, and eventually he has a number of diaries and journals of a woman who may have been dating one of the burglars. So, bookmark Eric's YouTube channel. And also, I really like Drew Beeson's channel, and Drew has given me a shout out a few times when I've encountered his live shows and left comments. Again, he and I may not agree on everything, but I think he's a wonderful source of a wide variety of information, so check out his YouTube channel also. Okay, I think I'll end it here. I really do appreciate everyone who watches these videos. I really do appreciate it. When you hit the subscribe button, it doesn't cost you anything and it just takes 1 second. And it helps getting me closer to my goal of getting this channel monetized, which it is not yet. I love it when you watch my other videos and when you click the like button on those, and I read all the comments eventually when I have time, and I try to either individually answer them or incorporate them into videos if I think that they have relevance that other viewers might enjoy. Okay, thanks again, and we'll see you later.